Recording? Oh,
Yes,
okay.
I started recording. Okay.
Okay.
So it's the Edge working group meeting of October 30. Okay, cool. So Saurabh just joined. So we have Miran, Yedong, Saurabh, and Ofer on the line. Manas said that he couldn't join. So I guess we'll just go and start the meeting. Okay, so for the agenda, we said that I wrote that we want to continue what we talked last week, which was to review the updated statement of work and start talking about a draft that we want to create to describe the different types of profile settings, and then we could give it raise it to a vote. Actually, by the way, there's another thing that I just thought about. Is any of you going to join the workshop on November 8th?
I think I will attend.
Okay, that's good. Saurabh?
No, I wouldn't be.
Good morning. Okay. So Miran and I won't attending as well. Won't be. We're not going.
Yes. So from that perspective, we should probably, because it's fairly soon, in 3 weeks, right? We need to plan for the presentation and update in a work group on the work group activities. And so I'm, by default, I ask Yedong, you will be the one presenting them.
Yes, yeah, I will do our working groups update.
Yeah, so we need also maybe for the next meeting, I guess, to at least to plan, review of the slides or update for the.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So do you want to start talking about the updated statement of work?
Yeah, that's agenda, right?
Mm-hmm. So just a second, I'll share my screen. I want to show it. Oh, here. Okay, like this. Can people see the statement of work?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So first of all, about the modern zoo SIG, that it appears in 2 places in the statement of work, and I didn't know if we want to remove it completely or not. Someone needs to handle the modern zoo, because part of the profile work is to define moderns which are part of the modern zoo. So we need some collaboration with someone who is responsible on the modern zoo. So I left it like this, but maybe at some point in time we need to see how can we find an owner to the modern zoo. Going down below to the deliveries, what I did is I added the delivery of defining the method for topology. And I removed mentioning of the Ornstein profiles that we had, which were the mobile, smart device, all of this. And I just said that there's going to be a topology mapping of profiles and definition of profiles. Also, I said that we're going to collaborate with the operator SIG, removed the modern SIG. These are basically the changes. So let me show you how it looks like now. Can't it show me to me? Oh, okay, like this. Okay, so I didn't change anything in the purpose or the scope. It remains the same. Although I think we may want to address that at some point later. Talking about collaboration, so kept the modern zoo and deliveries, I modified it to have number 3. So what used to be number 3 becomes 4 and so on. And it actually makes sense because now we're saying that the definition of the method of topology is what we're targeting to deliver now during Q3. Well, we're slightly late, I think. Maybe we need to change it to Q4 and make it 2020 Q1. But that's roughly the changes to the SOW. Any additional changes that people would like to do at this point?
That seems the update to this section seems reasonable to me.
Okay, so we don't get the SOW. Does the SOW looks okay now?
Can you slide it a little down?
We need to update, I guess, the timelines, no?
Yeah, that's true. So document 3, which is the topology mapping proposals, is going to be ready, I guess, in 2019 Q4. And then profiles, we'll talk about 2020, Q1 or Q2.
Do we want to talk about topologies or just ops and data types?
We want to talk about the topology mapping, which is how we partition profiles. That's the meaning of topology.
Oh.
It's explained on the document. So it's topology mapping of the profile. Let's say that a device can support multiple profiles. How do we define profiles? Are we defining it based on sensor type, based on network type, or usage? So there's a second document that I started to work on that I'm going to show that talks about what are the different ways to define families of profiles. And last week we mentioned that it might be a good idea to put it to a vote, just like the foundation working group did, and have the other members vote on what they see as a reasonable way to map the different profiles. In topology, I don't mean any kind of network topology or something like that. I just mean the mapping. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Okay, so for the next document, we're going to push them to 2020. I don't even know if it's...
So document 3 is then Q4, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, clearly Q4 because we are already in a Q4.
Yes. So I'll update this pull request. I don't know if I can do it right now. Let's see.
Is this the edge profile going to be optional, or is it going to be mandatory? Like every edge device needs to advertise which profiles it caters to.
So there's a couple of options that I think I kind of mentioned in the previous meeting. One of them is to have an API that the edge device can publish the profiles that he supports. Another option is to have these devices after they are after they pass the compliance of these profiles, then the device is registered in some public location, like the GitHub, ONNX GitHub, put some new directory and have a list of devices, and then application that wants to run on a device has this lookup table that it knows which devices supports which profiles. I would say that the option of query, an API to query, is probably the more reasonable one. But defining this API right now is outside the scope of this working group.
Right, but is it within scope to define the mechanism of compliance either way? Like, is it an optional, I think I'm probably a little confused here. So there are two ways. One is there is a compliance suite, somebody runs, updates the GitHub, and then app vendor can go and get the profile table, lookup table, and know what are the capabilities of the underlying device, correct? And the second option that you are proposing is that the runtime could query the hardware in some way, right? Whichever runtime we're talking about, not just ONNX runtime. Is that what you mean by the API?
Well, if we say that we want to describe the mechanism to query the profiles, this is also extending the statement of work. Because so far the statement of work that we described was just to talk about the profiles and the compliance.
Yeah, I guess, we are to make a, some sort of a suggestion or proposal for how the whole process of edge devices compliance would be done, and recommend this to, I guess, infrasig, because as a working group we are not necessarily defining the mechanics, and we can only provide recommendations, right? Having said that, I mean, if as a part of our I guess scope, they could make recommendations or give options, but not necessarily demand a certain way of doing it, right? This is the way I see it. It is something that we could put on table and say these are the possible options. Maybe not all of them, but this could be achieved this way or that way, and then leave it, I think, to SIGs to really kind of decide what to do.
Right. No, I think I was just trying to get the clarification on the second API approach. What does that mean? Where is that API going to reside? Like, is it a software API where a runtime is querying the driver, or is it a hardware API of some sort? That's where I was.
I'm not sure that I understand the difference between software API and hardware API here. What do you mean by hardware API?
Well, so one thing is the runtime, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the runtime is going to query, and eventually the hardware is going to say, okay, the driver will query the hardware, and the hardware will be able to address the runtime that these are the list of ops that I support, right? And the second thing is just you on the hardware itself. It's a smart speaker. I can only support this thing, and it's a black box, and it's a sticker that goes on the hardware itself. I don't know what that even means.
Yes.
But
So if we create a profile and we create a compliance tests, and these are accepted by ONNX, then people who create the hardware, this can be part of the discussions, how it's being marketed. Is there some kind of, as you said, is there a sticker that says ONNX compliant, but it still doesn't give you a lot of details on compliant to what. Let's say that you end up with something like 20 profiles, so you're compliant, but to which one of them? So you probably need more information. So that will have to be using some kind of a query mechanism.
Makes sense.
Since there's so many runtimes, that want to use ONNX, I don't think we should define an API, but maybe we should, in the final proposal, we should mention that there should be a way to query the profiles.
Makes sense.
Kind of hint on what the API needs to have.
Do you think we should, Saurabh, do you think we should put this explicitly in a statement of work?
I think so, because I probably I'm a little struggling on what is the end picture looking like, and maybe it's clear more to the others, but having that end picture in front of us, and these are the steps that we are taking in that direction, would help. And I believe this would be a good clarity. Then if the SIGs are aligned, that then we know that this is the direction we are headed to, right? Also, I would say that it would help us get guidance from the broader community that is this going to be something that is going to be mandatory, that all edge devices have to advertise all the profiles that they support, or is this an optional feature that Edge profile may or may not advertise it? If it does not, you're on your own. Doesn't mean that you're losing ONNX compliance. That would be the definition of compliance to me, or unless you guys think otherwise.
Okay. Well, if we are struggling with knowing what is the end picture here, that's a problem. I would say that. So that then you know, clearly then this should be obvious from the statement of work. And so you know, we have been, you know, this far into the work group you know, discussions and all that stuff, but then ended up still not being clear what is the outcome of the group. That's kind of not good, right?
Definitely.
I think it's actually written here. You can kind of summarize it in this sentence in a way. So the idea is you promote compliance for edge devices by describing all of this, and so let me tell you how I see the outcomes, and maybe we should see if we need to modify the statement of work to better emphasize it. When we started, the outcome that we saw all the time was create a set of compliance testing for edge devices. Since you cannot have one set of compliance tests that would work for all edge devices because they are very different in functionality, what we said is that these compliance tests should be partitioned based on the profiles. So this is where profiles came into the picture, and we said, okay, so what we need to do is to define a profile. For each profile, have a compliance test, and then at the end, we would have a good definition of compliance testing for edge devices by saying that some device support some list of profiles and he passed these compliance tests. To me, the purpose of the working group was around interoperability between different devices to assure to the application an edge device can run some modems. And it's all, you know, in a sense, it's all about compliance, in a way.
I'm with you, but Ofer, I think I've expressed that in the past too, that in more scalable, configurable devices, which model I am run is a very dynamic thing. It can happen that I'm able to run a model right now, and then something else happens in the platform, and I'm no longer able to run it. So that's where I probably need your help to accommodate how we fit in devices which have a lot of things going on in parallel also.
So I think the goal here was to to examine the static. Like I think you defined it properly in a way. Maybe I'm looking for a slightly different term. So I want to check to validate the device capability to run a specific set of models when running only this specific set of models. So each profile is tested on the device when the device is running only this thing. You can say exclusively. The purpose here is not to try to assess or to help people to understand what is the dynamic state of the device. I don't see it as a goal of the working group. This is, by the way, a much harder problem to kind of solve, and it's I don't think this is the scope of the working group, or I'm not even sure it's the scope of ONNX to try to help the application understand what's the dynamic state of the device.
Okay, so then we should be explicit about it, right? So if we're not covering,
we are kind of explicit, but not saying that we are looking into that, or maybe we should. I don't know.
yeah, maybe in the language here we can either state it as a
maybe we should have a section saying like a group will here's what we are gonna do, here's what we are not gonna do. This, this is not gonna cover things like any of this dynamic control, dynamic capabilities of device. Maybe
so we probably need to say it doesn't apply to devices which have a dynamic state, right? Because even in like a PC environment, right? Something is happening all the time. There are hundreds, 500, thousands of processes that are running all the time.
But wait, okay. So again, the focus here is on compliance of the device when he's being tested for each one of the profiles, just to make sure that he supports the functionality and the accuracy. We can better emphasize this. Like, if I look at other, I'm very much familiar into the domain of GPU standards and APIs. If a device passes the Vulkan compliance tests, it doesn't say that you can actually, any application can run any Vulkan at any given time on the device. It doesn't say that. It is up to the application to understand what's the situation, but the working group of Vulkan is not trying to say that it will take care of the dynamic load on the GPU. This is not part of the Vulkan certification process. The Vulkan certification is all about functionality. You support the functionality, you got the certification.
Great. So I think what we can do is what Milan had said earlier, right? Maybe we can add this, that what we cannot do should be the statement that you just made, that we're not expecting compliance to be something that expects an edge device to be able to run that profile all the time in any condition, right? So then it becomes not something that we have to guarantee all the time.
I agree, it's a fair statement.
Makes sense, right?
Yes.
Sure. I mean, I guess, this is the, putting the bounds on the whole thing, but what you just said is also kind of saying like, what is the compliance? I mean, if you're saying it's not it's not required to be compliant all the time, then it's like, what are the bounds of compliance? What does it make sense even? I mean, we are just saying this is the compliance kind of suggestions, and here's how we define compliance parameters. And then we also say, well, this is also not guaranteeing that a device is not required to comply with this all the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of contradictory.
Yeah, it is, like the GPU example that you were giving, right? There are times when there could be a loss of precision because of certain things that are happening in a platform. The latency might change because of certain things that are happening in a platform.
So okay, maybe language could be saying that device is expected to be compliant. I mean, we have to put some parameters around this. It has, when you say compliance, we are compliant. You usually describe the environment you are making this device compliant, right? Meaning like, okay, this is like with with only these processes running on device, and on average loading or something that you can describe. This device is expected to be compliant on a nominal sort of situation, and not under heavy loading or something like that. So, I mean, otherwise compliance doesn't make sense. How do we capture this aspect that the dynamic
Right.
environment of the device may impact the certain profile, compliance to certain profile, right? That's basically what you are saying.
Right. See, it would be simpler if our the attributes of our edge profile had only a list of ops. That would be a static thing. The definition that we have as part of our profile attributes, we have latency there, we have power consumption there, we have size there, we have accuracy there. These are all dynamic factors. So by very, the thing where we started from, right, like data locality was there, another one, right? Network bandwidth is a variable.
So,
now,
okay.
These are all performance things, right? Now, if ONNX does not cover performance things, then we need to revisit the attributes also then. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Frankly, I'm not trying to be difficult here. I'm just
actually, I disagree with this statement. Okay. Accuracy. Okay, latency and accuracy are things that if a device, okay, and I'm saying, assume a profile is being tested on a device. These profiles are only for compliance. Okay, maybe we should put it on the table. The profiles that we describe are only for the compliance purpose of the device. They should be running separately on the device where nothing else runs, and then the device is expected to meet this accuracy and latency as described in the profile. Okay, if the device is in a real-world situation trying to do something else, then at this point in time, this is not something that the profile is talking about. The fact that the device was compliant when it was tested to a certain profile doesn't say anything about what the device is doing because it needs to run multiple things. I would say that we need to define a different, I think that the attempt to try to use this profile for two purposes is in a way a problem. If you want to use this profile also to describe a runtime capability, then this description has to be strict. If you cannot meet the accuracy and latency, you cannot run with this profile at this time. we shouldn't start to relax profiles because we try to use them for two separated purposes. If we do that, it loses the meaning of what we just defined. Okay, so if the device, I'm getting back to my point, if what you're describing, there's a PC, I know that this PC is compliant to 2D image advanced profile running MobileNet. And I'm loading MobileNet and I'm telling the device, you should run it in a 2D advanced mode. Either he can run it or he cannot. I'm not starting to relax what does 2D advanced means, because the device cannot run it. So the device in his clean state is capable of running the 2D advanced profile. The fact that in some period of time he cannot run a model in this mode, that's the device problem. It's not something that should cause us to modify profile definition. And I completely disagree that accuracy and latency of profiles is something that should be removed from the profile just because device cannot do them. I think maybe we're trying to stretch it too much. Maybe we're trying to define things for the edge devices which we didn't plan to. You know, maybe we should focus that was, by the way, our purpose, myself and Megan's purpose all the way from the start, to focus only on compliance, and that should be the thing.
I think we have some ambiguity here, right? We're talking edge devices, we're talking compliance, strict compliance also. And so first, edge devices, our definition is covering scalable computing devices. It's not fixed speakers which only do one thing with pre-allocated resources, right? We're talking about scalable computing devices which are sharing resources. And the memory footprint, working set memory changes all the time on those scalable devices. So our definition of edge, as it stands right now, it's covering those kind of devices. Agreed? Now, secondly, we want strict compliance, number 2. And number 3, our definition of compliance has latency and accuracy and performance parameters there. So number 4 is, how do you, like, it becomes ambiguous, right? Like a device which has a variable execution profile, how can it guarantee? How can you guarantee that a model will run at a fixed latency on a device which has so many other things running all the time? Then we need to come up with something which says, okay, these profiles are either optional, or an edge device doesn't need to go and say that I am a static profile. Let's make the definition as a static profile. Let's call it static profile.
No, I'm not going. Okay, I think again the purpose was compliance of the device in a test environment, in a scenario of testing that we describe, where the only thing that runs on the device is the tested profile. That was the original purpose. If we try to extend it and say something else, then I think we should re-examine what this working group should do and what it shouldn't. Because we're trying to cover two things which I see as slightly orthogonal under the same envelope.
So is it fair to say, okay, I mean, to do exactly that, but I mean, maybe saying the same thing that Ofer just said, but the thing is, there is, when you have a profile that you're saying you're compliant with, you or vendor, as a vendor, is free to describe the environment this compliance is achieved in. Okay, so you can say, you know, similar to Wolfer said, well, I'm compliant with this profile if my system, you know, if my system is like loaded up to 50%. If it goes beyond 50%, I cannot guarantee compliance. I mean, those are reasonable things to say. You know, the vendor should probably be free to explain the test conditions or environment the device compliance is achieved for, right? And so then, you know, somebody will say, oh, okay, you know, if I have 10 different things running on my device and other things, well, you know, the compliance is not guaranteed. But if you are within these parameters, I guarantee you will have compliance. Is that fair to say? I mean, that we maybe spell this out, that part of the compliance is that each vendor needs to describe the environment in which compliance is achieved. Then dynamic aspect is removed because you're saying, you know, these are the parameters within which this profile or compliance is made. Would that be then within the bounds and controls of dynamic environment?
I think I'll have to think a little bit more on this, Milan.
So, for example, another example, you use the example of laptop or computer. Yes, similar is a mobile phone. Mobile phone is like a multi-hundred process device. There are many things happening on these devices, right, these days. These are many computers, right?
Yep. And
it's like, you know, it's the same thing. There's dynamic, right, environment. But I would imagine, you know, Qualcomm as a phone, you know, vendor, I mean, not vendor, but rather supplier of the solutions for the mobile devices, would you know, I would argue that if we would have a device, I would say, okay, yes, we are compliant with this device, with this profile, assuming nominal use case of device, meaning like just default processes running on device after boot up, right? And that's it. There is no video playing in the background. There is no whatever things like that are sucking the power off and all that. So I mean, I think if I say that, I would be okay in my mind, right?
So what is your definition of device here also? In a phone, let's say there is a AI accelerator like a DSP or something, right? Or would you expect this profile to be something for the whole phone as a platform? Whether it's a platform that would be compliant, or are we talking about a particular device?
No, I'm
just
talking
like
about
a DSP.
Phone. To me, phone is an IoT device, edge device. We just described in our definition, edge is anything that is edge, mobile, and cloud edge. And so, you know, whole phone is the edge device.
Actually, you know, Saurabh is raising an interesting point, because if a profile describes accuracy and latency, if you look at a phone, if I run it on the CPU, I get one accuracy and latency. If I run it on GPU, I get a different set. If I run it on our DSP, I get another. So
even in a DSP, it could run very differently also.
Yeah, but let's assume for simplicity right now that the user, the same way that we provide a runtime that allows you to select where are you running your model, then based on your decision, you would have different accuracy and different latency.
Right.
So
I'm actually coming from a mindset where I don't want these profiles to foster restrictions and folks are not able to innovate, right? They're not able to, hey, I cannot go and do some power saving tricks to reduce the latency or to save power or to compromise on accuracy because it's within my reach. And the profiles become that restriction that people are not able to do that. They are not able to run all these accelerators together. I would like to break a graph, run some in CPU, some in something else, something else, right? So all those things can probably restrict such innovations going,
So I think this is where
industry
we
wide.
see things, we see the gongs different. What the gong that you're describing is some gong, but it's not the gong that I saw of this working group. The gong that I saw was around ensuring compliance, which part of the problems that people got today in the world of machine learning, I am loading my application on some system. It can be an edge device, it can even be a cloud or whatever. I'm loading it on a system. I don't know what I'm going to get from the system. Manash described this point that they at Microsoft, they have this problem. When they send something to any of their targets, they don't know if this target supports the model, what is going to be the accuracy, and what's going to be the latency. Right now, we don't have this mechanism. So to me, the entire goal was around ensuring, creating some ground rules to allow application that tries to run an ONNX model to know what is the device capable to run and what is the guaranteed, or what is the accuracy of some models and the latency of some models. And based on that, the application knows what to expect.
So there is, well, I'll have to drop off in a few minutes. But now that you are talking about all this and what Saurabh is saying as well, it's got me thinking about the device as an edge device, and how you run this particular model or use case on device. Because on the same device, you can have different or multiple execution environments or frameworks. For example, we are talking about variety of neural network runtimes. We don't even cover that. I mean, but actually, I'm thinking we may need to, because in the end, you have ngraph, you have, I don't know, Qualcomm solutions, you have Huawei solution, you have all these different frameworks that all they can run on the same device, presumably. Let's assume case of laptop. Maybe there are multiple devices. There is a TensorFlow for God's sakes, right? And so, same model, same profile. It could achieve different performance and different, profile characteristics given how you run it. Is that fair statement?
Yep.
Yes. And this goes to your statement that you have to describe how the compliance was achieved.
Yes.
What was the system?
So that's if that's not clearly, well, we say.
And I agree with what Saurabh mentioned earlier, and I kind of combine it with what you're saying. We are talking about a static scenario, that there was some static configuration that this profile was working on the device in that specific static configuration. on a specific OS using a specific runtime, using no other devices running in the background, and we cannot guarantee if a device was passing this profile in this configuration, we cannot guarantee what's going to happen in a dynamic environment, and that may require a different scope, a different thinking on, and this is around Saurabh's proposal of dynamic profiles. That's a different thing on how do you negotiate with the device what's going on right now in the dynamic system. But the scope here was all around a well-defined environment that the compliance was achieved.
Yeah, I mean that's what we will keep saying. So I'm not sure. Now, if we cannot, I guess, agree on a statement of work, that's a problem. This far into the working group. Actually, I want to raise one other topic. Maybe I have only a minute or two, but I'm not sure. At some level, the way we started with the edge and how we define the edge and how much it includes a lot of things. But then also the concept of profiles and concept of compliance overall seems to be also applicable to, I don't know, any kind of compliance, not just edge compliance, right? I mean, in a wider sense, the scope of what we are talking about seems to go beyond the edge. It's just started bothering me because we are trying to put bounds on the edge, but then all we are, discussing is really general compliance discussion. So it's almost like this is a compliance working group, not the edge working group. Is that a fair statement here? Yep. So the question started grazing in my mind was like, okay, is the name of the working group proper? You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense?
Yep.
So I just want to put it up on the table for the audience or for the contributors to kind of think about. And that's something that it's a question in my mind.
Yeah, so Edge Compliance Working Group would have implications, right? All Edge devices would have to comply for the ONNX certification. And we would have to be very crisp about our definitions here. We need to work on the places where we see ambiguity there. Where we can either say something is static or, we have to correct the verbiage that way then.
Okay, guys, sorry, I need to drop.
Yep.
I'm not sure. It seems like we are a bit stuck here in terms of what the statement of work. That we need to make some decisions here how to proceed on this working group then.
Ofer, do you have any suggestions like how can we correct the ambiguity a little bit, like, or am I not, can I help express the ambiguity a little bit more? Or are you fully following what I'm saying, and do you have any thoughts around how we can?
I think that, in a way what Miran is saying is correct, that just by saying that it's an Edge working group and we try to cover all of the aspects of Edge devices, we are trying to cover too much. Like that, when someone is looking at the working group, he says, oh, it's going to cover all of the aspects of Edge devices. And in a way, that can be the source of the issue, that we need to break it down to smaller components. We say there is a, call it static compliance, or some way that we think about it. There is a interoperability or compliance. That should be a scope of one effort. And then there's another scope that says, how can I guarantee some, or how can I negotiate some running conditions of my model on a device where other things are running parallel, and these two scopes needs to be separated. So,
Okay.
And I think maybe what we should do is to try and to describe this ambiguity that came from the discussions and say, we need to separate them and we need to kind of better describe the names and the scopes of each one of these efforts to make sure that we don't mix concepts together. Maybe, you know, in the end, just like you said, when you talk about attributes, then some attributes would be used for compliance in a static, well-known conditions, and maybe some attributes would be used to negotiate a runtime situation, but we don't tie them together.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
I think maybe that as we have the workshop coming, that can be one of the updates that we can do. We can say, looks like we need to better describe scopes here, and looks like we need to break it down to two. One of them, just like Megan mentioned, compliance, you know, we always talked about edge devices and edge, the infrastructure edge. And so what's the difference in a sense between a PC that runs at the edge of the infrastructure and a PC that runs inside a cluster? They'll pretty much have the same different capabilities of performance, but classifying what they can do and describing their environment, it's pretty much the same. They run OSs, they run applications. So it looks like concept of compliance doesn't have to be on the edge.
Makes sense. Sounds good. Sorry, I need to run for another meeting.
Yeah, same.
I think we're on the same page. I look forward to how we can proceed. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for
Sure.
listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.